guys, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today we are getting down to business and I'm calling this my final book unhaul. That's right, I would say this is going to be my last unhaul before my upcoming move. I've scoured my shelves. This was definitely the most difficult unhaul, and then I'm kind of making myself get rid of some books that I did really enjoy, but I'm just trying to make space and be practical, as you can clearly see behind me. I still own way too many books. That being said, I have 3 significant stacks of books in front of me. I actually don't even know how many there are, but if I had to guess, probably around 50. So with that, I am pleased with myself. I am happy with that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. These books are in no particular order. It's a pretty decent mix of books I have read and books I haven't read, TBR books, which is always the most difficult thing for me to get rid of. I do want to shout, by the time this video is uploaded, I will have already donated these books, but without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. The first book shouldn't be too much of a surprise, and that is To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. I am not paying any amount of money to lug this book across the United States. I did not love it. I read it earlier this year, gave it about 2 stars. It's a big, heavy book. While I'm a bit sad getting rid of it because Clay did pick this book out for me, I already got his approval to get rid of it because I just didn't love it, and I don't particularly feel like I need to have it on my shelf for that reason. So this is probably the book I am least sad to see go. So book number 1. Next up is a collection of books I have read and really enjoyed and honestly would recommend, but generally speaking don't see myself rereading anytime soon. The first is Most Likely by Sarah Watson. This is a really fun YA contemporary following 4 girls who are best friends on the brink of their high school graduation. It's so much about kind of like deciding your life's future, taking that next step, as well as a little bit of love and romance along the way. I personally really enjoyed this. It also had kind of a mystery that was threaded through this book as well, which I liked quite a bit. So I'll be passing this along and hopefully some other readers will also be able to enjoy. The next 2 books were honestly really difficult for me to unhaul, but I just feel like I don't see myself coming back to them anytime soon. First one is A Dangerous Alliance, an ostentatious romance. This is a historical romance, a story that's fun and fluffy and centers on the main protagonist using Jane Austen novels to kind of fuel her search for a husband. It's fun, intense, dramatic. I really enjoyed it when I picked it up, but again, trying to make space on my shelf. And this one definitely hurts the most. I'm also going to be donating Bringing Down the Duke by Evie Dunmore. I loved this book. This book also kind of created my deep love of historical romance there for a bit. I read this and read like 8 historical romance novels after that. This is just great. A classic hot duke, a manor home in the midst of a snowstorm, a strong-willed heroine. It's got everything you love, and it was great. Next up might feel a bit random, but it's For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway. I really love this Hemingway novel. I've actually read quite a few Hemingway books throughout my life, but they've actually recently come out some new really beautiful covers that I feel like just fits the vibe of his books so well. So I won't lie, I've been eyeing those, so I figured I would pass this along and then likely pick up those newer editions once I move. Speaking of wanting a newer edition, this might be a bit of a surprising one, but I also have The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan, book 1 of the Wheel of Time. I want to read this series. I plan to read this series. I actually plan to start it later this year, but I've decided I really love the retro hardcovers, and I kind of want to go on a journey of like finding all of them at like used bookstores. They're just aesthetically so classic fantasy with the bright colors and all of that. And I personally don't love these new covers on these paperbacks. While I love the format of this paperback, I just am really into those retro hardcovers, and I've decided I want to collect them, you know? Gotta catch them all kind of mentality, so I'm gonna be passing this one along. This book is The Merciful Crow by Margaret Owen. This is a YA fantasy novel that I read last year or the year before, and I did really like it. I just feel like there's a lot of YA fantasy out there right now that I need to read and I want to read, and I'm also reading a lot less YA fantasy, so I'm being a bit more selective. That being said, I definitely feel like I still will check out this series, as I did think this was a rather unique fantasy world and I enjoyed how dark the magic was. But for now, I'm gonna pass along this first book, as I feel like it's great and a lot of people should check it out. So hopefully it'll pass through many more hands. Next up, we have two very popular YA novels I'm just gonna pass on, as I just feel like they'll get more love out in the world. The first is American Royals, which I actually own another copy of this, which is another reason why I'm passing along. I do not need duplicate copies in my life, at least too many duplicate copies within my life, so I'm gonna be donating this. But I just love the synopsis of this. It kind of is like American royalty vibes, Gossip Girl vibes. It's just a bunch of fun. Then I'm also going to be passing along Caraval by Stephanie Garber. I would say try to convince me otherwise, but again, this book will already be gone by the time this video is uploaded to hold me very accountable. This is super popular. I also feel like it's especially popular on Book Talk. I think it has to do with like a fantasy circus, sort of like night circus vibes, but YA. I'm not sure. I've owned this book for years and it's never really called out to me, so I figured just because I've had it so long and I haven't read it, it might be time to pass it along. But you never know. Maybe I'll read it actually. No, I'm gonna donate it. Next up are two books within a fantasy trilogy, and those are first, The Queen of Blood, as well as The Reluctant Queen by Sarah Beth Durst. This is another hard one for me. These have been on my TBR for a while. The reason why I've decided to pass these along are that while I've heard such good things about the first two books, I hear this particular series does not end super strongly, and nothing is worse than being committed within a story, loving the characters, loving the vibe, and then the ending is just not so great. This was said by a reviewer I personally really trust, so I've decided to just heed that advice and let these go. There might be a time where I revisit this. I've decided to vacate them from my life. Few additional books that are definitely very sad for me to let go. I just feel like they'll get so much more use if I pass them along. First two are books by Morgan Matson, and they are The Unexpected Everything and Save the Date. I actually have read and really loved both of these. I personally love Morgan Matson's YA contemporary stories. I think they're fun and funny, and I always feel like they center family, and they're just really, really heartfelt and like the perfect summer read. I've actually read most of her books, including these, and I really would highly recommend these books, but I just don't see myself rereading these anytime soon, as I just don't read a lot of YA contemporary, and when I do, it tends to be a new story. So with that in mind, I'm gonna be passing these along, but please read these if you haven't. They're absolutely so much fun. Next up is a book that honestly hurts my heart a bit to give up, and that is The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. I love this middle grade story. It's beautiful. The writing, the story, it just has so much to offer. I'm basically telling myself it's okay I'm passing this along, as I still have the audiobook, which is how I actually consumed the story to begin with, and the audiobook is extraordinary. But this is like everything I love in middle grade, like magical, lyrical writing, just such a lovely tale that has kind of some dark undertones to it, but really about family and like finding oneself and growth. Ugh, incredible. I love this book. I'm sad to get rid of it. Maybe this will appear in Austin. We don't know yet. Next up, I have Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. This is just another TBR book I have had for so long, and I just have not read it. I mean, I want to say like 6 years I haven't read this book. You'd think I would, because it's very, very short. It would be a perfect readathon read, but I don't know. It's just never really called out to me. I feel like it's pretty weird and creepy, which might be why. I'm also fearful this might be kind of like a horror book, which again, I'm a bit of a scaredy cat. So, you know, I've decided to say goodbye. I've also decided to pass along Storm and Fury by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I've read this. I actually really enjoyed this book. This is the first book to a spin-off series that kind of centers like angels and demons and like killing demons and stuff like that. It's a new adult series that's cheesy and romantic and just a lot of fun. I definitely do plan to continue with reading this. I like Jennifer L. Armentrout's writing, but I do feel like I'll probably shift to reading it via ebook, and I just don't feel like I need a physical copy of this any longer. Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Imes. I went back and forth on donating this. I did read this as well, and I liked it. I didn't love it. I've heard better things about this sequel, and the reason why I didn't want to get rid of this initially is because I still feel like I want to love this book so much. Even though I only really gave it 3 stars, it didn't really blow me away. It's not really a series I want to get back to anytime soon because I just found it okay. I still, like, in my heart wish I liked it more than I did. And a lot of people do say Bloody Rose, which I believe is the sequel, is much better. But I don't know, it's not calling out to me. With that in mind, I just don't feel like I should own it because I really didn't even like it that much, to be honest. Next up, I'm getting rid of a few duplicates. The first is The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. This is the first book to one of my all-time favorite fantasy series. I own the entire trilogy right up there. I do not need two hardcover versions of the first book. I honestly have been putting off getting rid of this version of the hardcover for so long for really an unknown reason. It's just because I love it so much. I felt bad getting rid of it, but I cannot have two versions of this book. So I've kept one, I'm getting rid of the other because I love this series. More people need to read it anyway. So I don't need two copies. I don't need two copies. Another duplicate is this fantastic box set of The Keeper of the Lost Cities by Shannon Messenger. This includes the first 3 books within the series. I own all of these books in hardback. I, again, don't need duplicates, and I feel like one of my favorite middle grade series, I'd rather pass this along so more people can read and enjoy it, because again, I don't need duplicates, gosh darn it. Next up, I have Edge Dancer by Brandon Sanderson. I just feel like this is a weird book. I love Edge Dancer, but I feel like from like a storage perspective, this doesn't really cohesively fit on my bookshelf. It's just kind of small and weird. It's like hard, I don't know, to have up there. So I've just decided I no longer really want it. And if I need to reread Edge Dancer, I can just access the ebook. But yeah, I don't know. I just don't like these like tiny little books. I find them, they bother me on a bookshelf. Anyone else? Some additional TBR books I've decided to pass along include the Great Library series, the first one being Ink and Bone, and the second one being Paper and Fire by Rachel Kane. I've just owned these for a long time. This is another like long-standing TBR series, and I basically gave myself a year to read this, and because I haven't picked it up still, I've decided to pass it along. I've just owned it for so long, and it just has stayed unread. So even though I love the idea of this story, it's a fantasy centering the hidden Alexandra Library, which does sound very cool. I've just held on to them for too long. Next up, I also have When We Are Vikings by Andrew David McDonald. I've heard really good things about this, but similar story. I've just owned it and not really picked it up, and I'm trying to hold myself accountable here, so also getting rid of this. I will also be passing along Steel Crow Saga by Paul Kruger. Next up, I have A Good Marriage, which is a thriller-based story. I don't read a ton of thrillers, so I've decided to just remove a few more of these off of my TBR ahead of the move, so I picked this guy. And then I've also decided to unhaul Well Met. This is hard for me because this is a contemporary romance centered around 2 people meeting and falling in love at a Renaissance fair, which just sounds so cute. But similar story, I've had this book for a really long time and I just haven't read it, even though I really want to. Maybe I'll keep this actually. Okay, I'm gonna keep Well Met. And then the last collection of books are all books that no longer have a dust jacket. You might recognize them from my rainbow stack. I am slowly kind of going through that and getting rid of a few books there. The first one is All Is Not Forgotten. Again, because I don't even have the dust jacket, I don't even know really what this book is about, but I've decided to pass it along. Then I have some YA novels here. The first is Wild Beauty, which is a book I've had for a long time. I think it's a fae story centering around like a garden of some sort. Again, I've just had it for a while and have not read it, so it's time for a new home. I'm also passing along I Hate Everyone But You, which I have read. This is a YA contemporary that's actually told through like text messages and emails. I actually recall really enjoying that sort of unique formatting, and I think it definitely added to the overall like story and narration, but I just don't see myself rereading this, so again, passing it on. Also getting rid of Map of Days by Ransom Riggs, which in general, I think it's funny that I own this book because I think this is book 4 to the series. I don't own books 1 through 3 and I haven't read any of them. So tell me how I even have book 4. I don't know. I don't know why. This is a mystery. Next up, I have The Glass Spare by Lauren DeStefano, another one I've just owned for a really long time. This, I believe, is also a YA fantasy. I recall reading and enjoying some of Lauren DeStefano's books in the past, but Again, trying to be hard on myself. And then the last book I have here is The Empress, which I have read by S.J. Kincaid. This is a sci-fi novel that's actually pretty intriguing. I enjoyed both books within this series that I read. I found them to be rather plot forward, and I definitely could not kind of guess the twists and turns. So yeah, I would highly recommend this actually, but we'll be passing it along as well. Alrighty guys, I'm now officially surrounded by books. Again, I tried to mostly focus on books I've already read to pass along, but I am proud of myself that I did get rid of a few TBR books along the way. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this final book unhaul, and I will see you soon with another video soon. Goodbye!